Okay. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Our God in heaven, we praise you for this Sabbath day, for the opportunity to be together across the miles, to get to know each other in fellowship. May we create bonds that endure forevermore, that when we spend together in eternity, we will remember these times and we would be enriched by each other's fellowship. Be with us through your Holy Spirit. In the name of Jesus, amen. Okay, so please tell me if I'm going too fast or if, because I have an accent different that, you know, English is not my first language. So I might say something that might sound funny to you. So please don't hesitate to ask me to repeat something, okay?
Okay, good. We can understand you really well.
Very good. So this presentation, it's a review. I usually, because I am still learning and I think it's a good way to do studies. I base my studies in either 𝗷𝗴𝗻𝗃's or Elder Tess's presentations. And I've been on a journey from the beginning of 2001, all the presentations that they had done in a sequence. When I got to this presentation, and you can see it in the slide, it's from May 8th, 2021. And the title that Elder 𝗵𝗻𝗃 gave that presentation is The Dangers of Cognitive Biases. So to me, this topic was so interesting and so rich that I decided to start studying on the subject. And I read a few books, and so I did like a 3-part series on this topic. But then to present it to other groups, I made this condensed version of it that has things that he presented and things that I've learned along the way studying about biases. The human brain takes about 11 million pieces of information each second. However, it can only consciously manage or process about 40 to 50 of those bits of information. For the brain to manage the other 10,999,960 non-attended bits of information, the brain has to create shortcuts. These shortcuts are a time saver strategy to allow humans to reconcile the volume of information coming in and allow them to decide what they're going to be able to handle. On the other hand, when this process of attrition is happening, facts can be distorted, and it causes us humans to make inaccurate judgments and distort reality. There's no way around it. We all have biases. It's part of our human condition that manages our decisions, reactions, and interactions. For us to improve in this area of personal growth, the first step is to admit that we have biases. So what is a bias? And I want to open it to ask you, what do you think it's a bias? What's your definition of a bias?
Can we just speak?
Sure.
I would say it's like a personal filter that information goes through, and things get added or taken from the original piece of information and kind of molded through your filter. So something comes out of the process that is tainted or like painted according to your brain, or all of those things which add up to create your biases, personal experience, sexual orientation, all those things that you mentioned that were listed in the first slide.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else have you created your own definition of like, what do you understand to a bias to be?
I would say, yeah, similar to what Emily said, process information in such a way that it fits your worldview.
Very good. Yes. I have a few definitions here that I found in the dictionary. There were so many, but one of them is a prejudice in favor or against of one thing, person, or group compared to another, usually in a way to be considered unfair, because what you just said, and I am not good with the names, but you just said that it's according to our worldview. So it's, and like how Emil said, is tainted by your experiences, right? So another one here is disproportionate weight in favor or against an idea or thing, usually in a way that is close-minded, prejudicial, unfair. Biases can be innate or learned. So this is very important to keep in the back of our brain. Some of those biases that we have, we kind of were born with them because of our family culture, our environment, but other ones we have learned through the years. And it could be through social media or like education. And not all biases are bad. There's some biases that help us, but for the most part, we understand a bias to be something that is creating an unfair situation for something. So you might remember this, but let's do a little scenario here. And we're going to discover which of these two characters can be Steve. So Steve is a very shy introvert person that lives in the state of Kansas in the United States. Steve is helpful and patient, but has little interest in connecting with people or in world that is in the reality. He lives kind of in a world of his own. Steve is meek and tidy, and he needs order and structure. This is all the information we were giving about Steve. So in summary, he's introvert, he's helpful, he's meek, he's tidy, and needs order and structure. So based on this, what is most likely Steve's profession? Is he a librarian or is he a farmer? I know that most of us immediately would go to, he fits the characteristics of a librarian. It's so, to me, it's like textbook personality of a librarian.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we did this using our fast brain. There was no like, even though we had heard this before, this it's illustration, still our brain wins that battle. Like, no, it's a librarian. Like, he cannot be a farmer, because a farmer, what would we say a farmer be like?
I think a farmer would be more like outgoing and talking to a lot of different people, and yeah, maybe meek, but more self-sufficient. Maybe that is the word.
And maybe like rude, and maybe like dirty, like he's not like all put together, right? Yeah. We would not put those two things together, because it's how our brain is wired to. If the librarian seems like the obvious choice based upon the limited information we got, then we've been fooled again by the fast brain. We are using tunnel vision to arrive to this conclusion. If we verified our conclusion for more than a second, making the slow brain do a little work for a change, we would realize that there are substantially more male farmers than librarians in the United States. In fact, there are roughly 20 times more male farmers than male librarians. If we take the statistics, it's more likely that Steve is a farmer and not a librarian. But because we have this tunnel vision, we were given limited information, we put him in a box, because we think we know the characteristics and the personality of a librarian, and we have our own picture of a farmer. The fast brain tells us, oh, I know the answer to that. It is very simple. There's no way he's a librarian. All based upon our mental preconceived ideas of the two groups of people. If we will give a chance to the slow brain, it would say, hold a minute, let's work out the statistics. What are the chances that Steve is a librarian? Well, it's very rare, only 1 in 20. That means 5% of males in the United States are librarians. System 1, the fast brain, loves to use limited information for a quick judgment, and it blocks all out conflicting information. This quick judgment causes us to block anything that conflicts with our ideas. And that's what we call tunnel vision. The fast brain takes 2 or 3 pieces of information, that's all it needs, and then it infers, invents causes, intentions, and then neglects anything else that's ambiguous. This is why you can meet someone and assume that you know what they're like based upon their profession or the way they look. It is said that we have 7 seconds to make our first impression. Some studies say that it's 15, 20, even 30 seconds, but the truth is that you only have 1 time to make a first impression. What is scary about this is not all based on performance per se. It's on how the other human is going to frame you. So this morning when we met for the first time, in about 6 seconds, we all made an assumption of each other, good or bad, based on preconceived ideas and things that we have in the back of our minds. And that's something that we cannot even fight about because it's so fast that if we don't make a conscious effort to give the other person that we're meeting a chance, we're going to just fall on the trap sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. So the fast brain must take a shortcut to cram all the information coming in. Because when you meet a person, you see them, you hear them, and the preconceived ideas about what you see and what you hear makes that compact assumption. I don't know if you see this as a serious issue. Let me reframe it to be plain. Our brain will arrive at a conclusion about someone based on what they see, what they hear in their first impression, a conclusion of supreme importance. Where do they come from? Well, that has shades of nationalism. What color are they? That's painted with shades of racism. What gender are they? Shades of sexism. What the fast brain will do is decide on who this person is based on those three things: nation of origin, race, sex, in 7 seconds. So according to what we already learned, in 7 seconds, there will be 77 million bits of information. Remember the first reference we did? So in 7 seconds, because we first referenced 1 second, so in 7 is 77 million bits of information to narrow it down to 280, and bam. Now you and I have made an idea of who each other is. Why is this important to you say, for us to be spending time on this subject? What does it, doesn't sound like prophetic or a prophetic teaching? Well, if we say that we want to be on board with the message of equality, there are 2 important things that we need to get clean from, and it's racism and sexism, and everything that cascades from there. So I hope that you start seeing the link of these 2 topics in our prophetic message of the hour. Did you have a comment? No? Good. Okay. Any questions? Anything you want to add? No. Okay. So let's talk about the integration, reconciliation of the fast and the slow brain regarding these 5 issues that we mentioned. So class, some countries are more into class than others, some cultures, nationalism, racism, sexism, and homophobia. I just put it as LGBTQ+ in here. When we are dealing with these subjects, which is the message of this movement in reality, part of what we are contending with is the movement, in the movement and as individuals, is how to deal with this obvious problem, the fast brain bias that we all have. We are clear that we need the fast brain. We need it to survive, and there's reasons for that, but not to take over our judgment. The counteract our natural tendency to form beliefs regarding limited information, we need to get into the habit of asking ourselves why the opposite might be true. We would be embarrassed if we figure out that we have offended someone because the actions of our fast brain. What we need to do is to stop and ask ourselves why the opposite might be true. This question will get us to test all assumptions and be prepared for new challenges ahead. It will help us to prevent underestimating the issue and misleading people regarding the situation. And it will also help us asking why the opposite might be true, will widen our lens to help us to identify helpful information that we have been subconsciously ignoring. So the next time you make a big decision, and we have an automatic intuitive preference, slow down. This is the advice. Slow down and scan your faulty thinking checklist and ask yourself, is this the best option? Or just the option I have been frequently exposed to, or is my to-go assumption? So in my quest of learning about this, I came across a book from that was published by the executives of 𝘃𝗶𝗴𝗲𝗏, and it's in there. The whole book is a framework and strategy, and the title of the book is The Bias Progress Model. And I want to present it to you a little bit, and maybe it's going to help us. I know it's a concept, it's like theoretical concept, but sometimes it's good to put theory on something that we're going to put in practice, so we can like establish the components of this situation. One of the things that it's incredible, and I think it's so important for us to understand, is that, and I say it as a good news, is that our brains are wired not just for biases and preferences, but also for change and growth. There's elasticity in our brain, and we can create new neuron pathways. We can change our habits. And we that have a spiritual belief, we also know that God intends for us to be able to grow and expand our thinking and to not get stuck in bad behaviors. So that's why it's so important. It takes time. And more important, it takes a conscious effort to create a new natural pathway, new ways of thinking and habits. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. So looking at the concept of presented in the book by 𝘃𝗶𝗴𝗏𝗏, and 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗏𝗏 is a big company. I think it's multinational corporation, and they were famous for their planners and like agendas, but as technology moved on, they just expanded, and they're like a leader on HR, human resources strategies. So they have consultants, and they go and teach about all kinds of subjects regarding human resources. And they dedicated this group of people to create this study. And to me, it was so important. So they say that to make progress, the way we make progress, they created this model, and the framework works this way. So the first section, they say we have to identify our biases, and they give us strategies how to do that. And then cultivate connections is the second stage of the process, because when we get to know people and we connect with people, that's when we are able to learn about each other and destroy barriers that we have put for groups or different genders and all kinds of cultural barriers. And the third section, they called it Choose Courage. And I think it's very interesting. It's a thought-provoking title because it's not easy. we might say it's like, oh yeah, like, oh no, we know, we've been studying this in the movement for a few years now. We are not sexist. We are not racist. We have no issues with any LGBTQ. We don't have any like distort ideas. We know where we're standing. And it's not true. We are like, we're still fighting this process. We are more aware than we were a few years back. But if we're honest with ourselves, we know that, and I don't know how it's in your country, but where I live, there's a lot of shades of racism that people think have been won and they are not. So until we don't say, I need to face it myself, and I need to realize that I need to take a stand against any racist remarks or behaviors or anything like that. The only way I'm going to do that is to be courageous, because it's not easy. And you might be able to, you might be feel ridiculed by your friends, your family, because you are in this, immersed in this culture. For example, in my case, I was not born here in the United States. I was born in South America. And so I belong to a subculture, right? Because, and my parents are each from a different country. So I don't have like one nationality that I am like, oh, I am this is my national. I don't have that. I have several. Plus, I grew up as an Adventist, so I have that other bubble culture inside that. My natural language, but I married somebody from Europe, and we speak Italian at home, so that's kind of like another little bubble. So I'm very different from people around me. If I am going to judge everybody by my bubbles, everybody's going to be outside my circle. So I have to be courageous and say, you know what, these are my problem areas. I'm going to address them. So this is the strategy of this book. So they divide these 3 sections and they go in depth in it. And once you have collaborated with you, identifying these 3 areas of your life, then you can apply them across and come up with a strategy on how to debunk or how to make progress on getting rid of biases. So let's go in, go from each of the sections. So the first section, it's called identifying biases. And, okay. To identify a bias, we must first know what it is and the relationship between our biases and our identities. Understand the basic neuroscience of why it happens, know some common terminology, and learn when we are most susceptible to bias traps. When talking of how to identify biases, we must take on the intellectual pursuit of introspection and build self-awareness so we can look outside our own experience to consider the experience of those around us. So it just from the get-go, we understand that this is going to take time. It's not going to take a couple of presentations from 𝗿𝗏𝗴𝗏 and just a goodwill, like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to have biases in anybody. And, you know, and it happens in our groups, in our, even if we're small groups or within the movement at large, we might have biases and we say, and they're like blinded and behind, like, and we could say, no, we're good with everybody and we understand everybody. But as soon as we're listening to a presentation, now that 𝗿𝗏𝗴𝗏 does this interactive presentations, I don't know if it happens to you, but somebody asks a question, I'm like, why are they asking this question? Like, we should know this already, you know, like right away. We judge somebody and we don't give a person the chance. That's where they are in their journey, and give them the space to be where they are. And it's vice versa. So that's in a short summary of that first section. So I am sure that we have heard about different types of biases. In fact, there are 180 plus biases. And it would be a waste of our time to try to go and analyze each of them. So what I did is that I took them, like to do it like in a bird's eye glance, how we're going to recognize biases, and I divided in the 3 main traps. Because if we go back, we understand that we need to learn some terminology, and we need to see where we are more vulnerable or susceptible to these traps. So I thought that would be a good place to spend a little bit more time. And again, I'm sorry if it's very conceptual, but my goal is that I trigger in each of us the desire to learn more about this, and not just to put it in the back burner. So maybe some of the concepts I'm gonna give you are like, how can I say, like dry or too a textbook, but it's just to give you food for thought. You know what that means, food for thought, like to provoke a thought. Okay. So the 3 main traps that represent common circumstances when our brains are most susceptible to bias are information overload, feelings over facts, and the need of speed. And if we, just by the title, I am sure that each of us can relate to this, because our lives are full with information. Sometimes it's so much, even within the movement. You know, when we have a camp meeting and we have like 6 presentations, you were asking me how was when we were here in Florida. It was so much information that I have to go back and watch every one of the studies to make sure that I'm learning what it is, because when you're there one after the other, it's hard to be able to process each subject in depth. So feelings over facts, I'm a very emotional person, like, so I feel very connected with this one. I have to be very careful not to let my emotions take over with a fast brain. And need for speed, we're all busy. We are so busy, and we think we can cut corners and come up with our own strategies to understand what's going on or how to identify a situation or a person. So I think those 3 are very relevant traps. And so let's look into that. So when we are in these circumstances, the brain pushes more information to the side to focus on the 40 bits of information that we can process. Remember, the human brain takes 11 million pieces of information each second. However, it can only consciously process 40 to 50. And for the brain to manage that other 10,999,960 non-attended bits of information, it has to create the shortcuts that we talk about. So these shortcuts, we learned there's time saver strategy to allow humans to reconcile the volume of information coming and allowing them to decide. On the other hand, we learned also that they can distort the facts causing inaccurate judgment and twist the reality. And in that process, our brain sometimes pushes aside important information. And when we are overwhelmed, highly emotional, rushed, and for some of us, that's just a regular day, our brain is more likely to lean on shortcuts. So that's the default mode. So let's define each of these traps. The first one, information overload. When we face an overwhelming amount of data or input, and we are at risk of information overload, our brain have learned to automatically filter much of that information, even the bits that might be useful. For example, if we have hundreds of resumes to review, to follow through, we might be even more likely to lean on biases to help us make fast assessments. For example, two examples of this are cognitive shortcuts can occur in this information overload situation. And those are confirmation biases and anchoring biases. So confirmation biases is the idea that we tend to seek information that supports our existing beliefs. And that's kind of what we said at the beginning that a bias was. It's a way to filter and focus. For example, when we want to catch up on the news, we don't watch all the available outlets and come up with a summary. What did CNN said, what MSNBC said, what Fox News said. No, we do our own investigating reporting. And as Elder Parminder told us, so many, he told us in an example of washing up powder. So you go to the supermarket and you're going to buy laundry detergent, and there's like 10 types. Most likely you're going to go to the one that you have seen a commercial, the first one that comes to your brain. The same thing with the news. Like, we're going to go to a newscast that we like the newscaster. We understand how they speak. We like their sequence, and maybe the ones that are really short, so we can get the news of the day, and we come up with our assumptions. And if we stay in a place, getting information from a place that it's confirming what we already believe, that's where we're going to be in a trap. Interestingly, research suggests that people experience genuine pleasure, a rush of dopamine, when processing information that supports what they believe already. And so I thought that was very interesting. That is not only a need for deciding, like creating like a shortcut, cutting from all this information I got, I'm just gonna get this section because it's what I already believe. And for example, right now we're on the process of hearing the different speeches from our candidates for presidency. And since I am more agreement with one, I am just happy when the candidate that I believe is the best says something that confirms what I already believe. And it's like, oh, yes. But I don't go beyond that because I already felt good. And it creates this chemistry in our brains, a rush of dopamine to confirm that what we believe is right. Never looking into another area because we already have that confirmation. The anchoring bias is the idea that we rely on our first piece of information we see to make decisions. Anchoring biases is evident in the first impression. We make a multitude of judgments about people, character, intellect, ability, and so forth with the first few seconds. Like we said, we have 7 seconds to make that first impression. So let's move to another trap, feelings over facts. 2 common biases that you find in this trap are in-group bias and negative bias. It's our tendency to favor the people we like or those who are like us, while excluding those that are different. And that is in-group biases. And I don't know if it happens. I only have one brother, but I've seen in families that have more siblings than more than 2. Sometimes 2 get along better than the third one or the fourth, and they always are with them finding a strategy, and they get along, so they come up with how to convince mom and dad to do something. Or even at work with coworkers, you get along with better, and so you go to the boss and you say, you propose something, and you have already somebody that confirms what you believe, and there's strength in the group, right? So that's kind of like in-group biases. A negative bias is when we are more powerful affected by negative experiences than positive. For example, when I was little, I had 2 different circumstances that a German Shepherd bit, not like bad bite, but they like hold my wrist and like didn't let me move. Like I was so scared. So I have a bias towards German Shepherds. I am very afraid of them. My husband loves German Shepherds. He grew up, all his pets, as he grew up in his household, they always had German Shepherds. So for him, that's the best dog in the world. And so it's really funny, you know, like the outlooks we have, because I had a negative experience with a German Shepherd, 2 different negative experiences. So now I'm like, all the German Shepherds are scary. They're going to bite me. That's a negative bias. Let's move to another trap, the need for speed. The need of speed occurs when we cut corners to act quickly. Often these time savers are based on bias that we can be simplistic, self-centered, and even counterproductive. 2 common biases that we find in this trap are attribution bias and need of speed. Attribution bias is the idea that we judge others or their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intents. Let me repeat this, because this is an important concept. We judge others by their actions, but we judge us by our intents. If I make a mistake, I have a very good explanation for it because I know my intent. I know I had good intention to do this. But if a colleague or a family member or your spouse or a friend makes a mistake, they are profoundly flawed, they're disorganized, they don't care, they don't have commitment. They're the worst. Because we are assuming that we already knew that our intention was good, but no, not them, because that's how we judge in a circumstance. And the second trap that we find in need of speed is sunk cost bias. And this is our tendency to continue our current course of action because we have invested a lot of time and money, energy on it. So I don't know, maybe you have a car, you've had this car for many years, and you keep investing money on it because you said, Hondas are the best cars, and I'm going to continue fixing my car because they said that I can sell my Honda after 200,000 miles. I can still sell it really well. I'm going to keep investing on it because it's a good thing. And then you come to a point sometime that it's like, well, I have invested so much in it that now I just have to change the tires. It's just a little bit more because I have already changed the transmission and changed, I don't know, the paint and all these other things. I'm already so invested in it that I might as well continue investing. Same thing with relationships. We might be in a relationship that is toxic and it's not good, or we have not given a chance to somebody to learn more about them. Let's say it's a toxic relationship, but we have been in that relationship for so long, we don't want to even question it. We're going to continue in it because we're like in deficit on that, in our investment in that relationship. We have put too much energy and work on it, even though it's not going anywhere, but we want to make it happen instead of like facing the facts and fixing it. It's like, oh, this is the way it's been all the time, and I don't have time to have a conversation with this coworker and fix these problems. I'm just gonna continue going like that and put up with whatever the situation is. So we come to this point and we can name our biases, some of them, and we can put name and last name because we've identified the different traits and we were able to identify some biases under those categories. Now we can see them, we can recognize when they're coming to attack us. But Isabel, you're gonna say, how are you going to link this to other studies that you mentioned at the beginning? Please follow me. Let's move to another topic and let's see how we can come back and put all these pieces together and keep it in the front of our mind. The second section of the progress model that I talked to you about a few slides ago, like here, it's cultivate connection. So in cultivate connections, they divided in two areas, empathy and curiosity. Some of our deepest human needs are to belong, to feel connected, to be understood. This second component of the progress bias model is to build around cultivating meaningful connections through empathy and curiosity. Empathy and curiosity are two sides of the same coin. The interpersonal and the intellectual approaches to build connections. I will compare and contrast with spiritual and literal. Oops. If we can meaningfully connect with others, we only often find ourselves surprised at what we learn, which is clear check on biases and preconceived notions. Cultivating connections gives us a path through bias by getting to know people for who they truly are versus who we perceive they are. And if we go to the most basic common denominator between humans, we all have the same needs. We all need to belong. We all need to feel connected. We need to feel understood. And if you think about our groups, one of the things I see that is such a blessing, the opportunity that I am being given to go and speak to other groups. Like here I am with you today. And it's so, for me, it's very heartwarming because I feel that I belong to something bigger than just my little group, right? And then now I have a personal connection with you. When we have a big meeting and I see your picture, like I spent some time with you all and I'm like, okay, these are my friends. Even though we might not know each other beyond a couple of words we said, there's something we are creating right now today. We're growing we're connecting each other to a link. And it's forevermore. We can only grow it from here but we put the first seed, you know? So I think this is such a great way to help us connect, because at the end of the day, all of us that are in this movement, we want to be understood. We want to feel normal, right? Because I'm sure you have lost friends, you have lost connections with family because you have changed your points of view, or you have grown in your points of view. I was not a conservative Adventist, but I was too liberal for the liberals. I mean, too liberal for the conservatives and too conservative for the liberals. So I always was kind of in the middle. But yeah, my friends now think I am like, some of them thinks I am an apostasy. Some of them think that I'm really cool now because I am, you know, so it's different. But when I am with you and with other friends from other groups, I feel validated and I feel comfortable. So that's very important to cultivate these connections. And like I was saying before, not all biases or not all those things are negative. Some of them, we're going to find good things in it. The third component of the progress bias model is choose courage. We often think of courage as a brash and bold act, but courage is not always loud and ostentatious. It's sometimes quiet and careful. Through a combination of careful and bold courage, we can make progress on biases. This third part of the bias progress model includes 4 ways to act with courage. Courage to identify biases, like we said at the beginning. That's the most important thing. Be honest with ourselves where we have biases. Courage to cope with the bias, because we're not going to be able to get rid of all of them, but we can learn how to cope with it, how not to be susceptible to sink into the traps. Courage to be an ally for somebody that it's not like us, somebody that we feel we have nothing in common or we have biases towards them. One of the best ways to do that, it's connected to the next one. It's courage to be an advocate. So if you have a coworker, and work situations are like easier to put as an example, but like if you have a coworker where you feel that you have challenges because you're so different politically, or other cultural things or whatever it is, I promise you, if you fight for that person, if you find a cause to help them and work together in an initiative, in a project, and be an advocate for that person to elevate them from maybe that aspect of their life that you are thinking they're lacking, because, and maybe it's a bias you have towards them or whatever it is, once you do that, you're going to be a champion for that person, and you're going to grow as a human, and you're going to give a chance to another human to grow and to learn from somebody that's different from them. So that's why they name it courage, because this is not easy. If we really want to attack our biases and work out those things, we have to be courageous. Many times we think we do not have unconscious biases because our consciousness tells us otherwise. I know I concentrate a large time talking about inequality or biases from males to females. Well, that's what we focus a lot on. But what about those biases that come you know, it's easy to say, okay, there's a lot of sexism from males to females. And let's go back to the workplace. There's a lot of sexism in corporate settings. But what about, have you ever thought of females being sexist to other females? And that happens too. So, and this is something that is very important. And I think as we study more about radical feminism, what we have studied in the past few months or so, is that it's not what we thought it was. And it's more than this way. We also have to be aware of our surroundings. Are we being bullied towards somebody of our same race or our same gender just because we feel we are superior? Because an Apis bull comes in all shapes and colors. So it's important to put that out there. I'm going to read this quote. I'm going to move on a little bit ahead, but this is one of the contributors to the book that I mentioned, and I really like this quote. She wrote, when we are in a situation that bring the unconscious to the heightened level of consciousness, we often find that our unconscious bias directly contradict our stated values. So I know there's a lot to unpack in there, but I want us to think about this. I might say to you, oh, I have no preconceived ideas about other female coworkers. We are all the same. We're all the same, and we are all being oppressed by the male coworkers. But one day, one of our coworkers comes and say they're pregnant. And now we're like, oh, now I'm gonna have to do her work. I'm going to feel that I'm not going to be a champion for this person because I think it's going to be a hinder on my situation. So I could say I'm an advocate for other females in my workplace, but as soon as something happens that is going to affect me, the real stated, it goes against my stated values. So I can be a champion for somebody until I really have to champion their cause and help them. So it's very important. Also, it happens in our groups. We could say, yeah, we are on board with leadership. Yes, I want to be part of the solution. No problem. But as soon as our leaders tells us there's going to be a change, something that's going to affect us directly, we're like, oh, no way. Oh, why do they make that decision? This is not a good leader. And we go on and on. So I think it's very important that we are aware that we could say that we walk a life of equality, that we say that we carry on the midnight cry message in our hearts, that we are on board with all this. But what is really happens when the truth comes, with the moment that I have to make that decision in reality, not just in concept. So I hope I got that point across. So one of the strategies Elder Parminder gave us on how to deal with this is use and embrace mindfulness. And also the people from the book use the same. So I thought it was very interesting. The two, that his presentation and the book had similar strategies for coping with this. So mindfulness is one of the most critical skills required to identify bias in ourselves and others. Our minds are incredibly prone to wandering away from what is happening in the present moment. And we spend almost half of our day thinking about something more than that's what's really going on. Without mindfulness, decisions become automatic. we often categorize people on binary terms like good or bad, important or unimportant, add value or waste time, right or wrong. What is mindfulness and how to use it, and how to mitigate biases with it. So mindfulness is a state of mind to achieve, that can be achieved by concentrated our awareness on the present, on the moment, focusing on our feelings, our thoughts, in a sense to better understand how to engage with others and react to stimuli. What we are trying to achieve with mindfulness is creating a pause in between information coming in and our emotional reaction to information. Strong mindfulness practices help us to become more conscious to our own thoughts and feelings. So here's some strategies. Set time to practice mindfulness. Pause and describe your situation. Try to have a tech blockout or disconnect. And I like this quote that I wrote here in the top. It says, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, and that includes you. So you know how you have to just restart your computer once in a while and get all the bugs out? Well, the same is with us. Sometimes we are so attached to our phones and all the technology, and we don't have time to expand our thoughts. Also pre-plan. Also zoom out the big picture, like think about your goals. And most importantly, I would say set intentions. Make specific name intentions on how you're going to work the strategies. If you have identified some biases that you're struggling with, like write down some steps, like practical steps on how to work these things out, because it's going to take a different meaning. It's going to take shape. Is going to encourage you to keep it up once we put it in paper, or it could be electronically too. But so here's some pointers. So take time, and these are the ones from the book, and these are the ones from 𝗿𝗏. So take time to make decisions. Don't just make your first assumption. Ask yourself, is there a better option? Be vigilant. Be aware of what's going on around you. Do your own research. And examine yourself each time you engage in a new relationship. Don't take it for granted the next time you meet somebody. Ask yourself, how was that interaction? Did I learn something? Did I have some biases in me? How can I work so next time you meet somebody else, you have that practice of being mindful of assessing yourself honestly, how each interaction goes. So we're all students of prophecy. I am a human trying to learn how to live and walk the life of equality, equity, and inclusion, and diversity. I want to be able to walk back to Eden and be clean from sexism, racism, and any stain of patriarchy. So come with me and let's review this short film. The production is called The Small Flat. The scene that we are going to focus on is called The Struggle. And the time frame is like right before Sunday Law. There are two characters in our movie. They live in this small flat. They cannot go outside. They're always together. They live in tension with one another because they have different personalities. There's drama, there's intrigue, there's conflict, controversy, power struggle. The two characters in our movie are always in disagreement with each other. Can you feel the tension? If you put yourself in the middle of that flat, can you feel that tension? So the one character is the fast brain. It's system 1. It's fast, impulsive, automatic, intuitive. The other character, system 2, it's slow, thoughtful, deliberate, calculating. So in middle of that conflict, you and I find ourselves with this conflict, because that's how we lived our day. We are always in this battle, controlling one and the other. And we need both. We cannot say one is bad and one is good. So I want to close with this quote from Step to Christ 47.1. It says, what you need to understand is the true force of the will. This is the governing power in the nature of humanity. The power of decision or of choice. Everything depends on the right action of the will. The power of choice God has given to humans, it is theirs to exercise. You cannot change your heart. You cannot of yourself give God its affections, but you can choose to serve God. You can give God your will. God will then work in you to will and to do according to God's good pleasure. Thus, your whole nature will be brought under the control of the Spirit of Christ. Your affections will be centered upon God. Your thoughts will be in harmony with God's. Let's close in prayer. Our Heavenly God, we recognize you as our Creator and our Redeemer. And we ask you today, with humble hearts, to give us determination to be ready for the great test. We know it's ahead of us. We can see the signs and hear the rumbles. We want our wills to act according to the life of equality, where there's no sexism, racism, or homophobia, no patriarchy, nothing hiding in our thoughts. Those that are conscious and those that are unconscious. We give you our will, and today we ask that the Holy Spirit guide us and that guides our affections to be centered in you. In Jesus' name, amen. Any questions, any comments?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we were just thinking, should we stop the recording or not? But we'll just leave it so that Mark maybe can look it back as well when there are questions or thoughts, and then we can always cut it when it's not interesting.
Sure.
Thank you.
You can do editing. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I had
interesting. Oh, sorry.
I just
go ahead, Annabelle.
I just wanted to say, when you were talking about unconscious bias, you talked about this part where we think we support women, but actually we don't, because we only do it until it doesn't fit us anymore. And you said, we judge other people, and I don't remember where I saw it. Maybe it was in a post or something, but at least this is really true from my own experience, is that when I or somebody else judge someone, it often makes us feel better about ourselves. We feel like we're a better person. If we judge someone's looks, we feel better about ourselves because we're like, oh, I look better than this person, or I'm more clever than this person. So I just wanted to add that to the unconscious. It makes us feel better about ourselves.
I found in my work experience, that I have had some leaders when I worked in corporate America. Now I work kind of for myself, but before, like there were women that were bullying us, other women, and it was so toxic. So I always wanted to kind of like, even though before I started studying this in the message, I always wanted to be very different with my coworkers. Like I set that intention long time ago. It's like, I don't want to put people through this, because in what you're saying, I think people that do that is to validate themselves, to make themselves better. Yeah. Good point. Thank you.
I think it's for years that some psychologists, I was working then at depression courses and so on. Some psychologists just told me, like, every negative thing that you say about someone else is just to make yourself look more positive. And since then, I'm always kind of, not always at the moment itself, but then afterwards, I think, why did I say that? What is it in me that makes me want to say something negative about this person? What is actually my insecurity in there? And why do I not just validate this person? And why do I need to say something negative now? And sometimes it comes afterwards. Sometimes it comes at the moment. I think, what am I doing now?
Exactly. And I think that's so important, because sometimes we cannot catch all of our bias and traps at the moment. But if we use time later on and practice, like go back and think about it. What led you there? Like, why did I say that comment? Like, why did I laugh about that joke? Like when they're making a joke that is racist or sexist, or like, and you like grint and like, I should not be laughing at this joke at this point of my journey, right? But how can I next time not fall into that trap? That's very important.
I think the most difficult thing that I find is that when others are talking negative, that I don't start talking with them about this negative thing, That's the most good thing. To then just keep your mouth shut, sometimes say something against it, or just walk away and let them talk and not join in this talk, whatever the situation it is.
And I've been learning that, like when there's criticism about something in an organization or in our groups or whatever, I thought that I needed to be like an advocate, like a voice advocate, but I've learned that I better walk away, because it's a trap. Somehow, because you want to feel part of the group, and maybe you're going to chime in an idea that is borderline not positive, or like nod your head, kind of giving that other person an idea that you agree with them, and that could spark a problem. And so I've learned it's not in my personality, but I've learned that it's more important to just walk away, seem like you're not as friendly as you would like to be perceived. But that's another important thing that we learned, that we don't have to gain everybody's approval. Because when we are walking in equality and equity and diversity, we have the pattern, we know the path. So if we want to be wishy-washy, then we might as well go to one side or the other, right? But it's a conscious effort that we have to put that work. We have to work. It's not, it doesn't come natural to us.
Yeah.
I also had a comment or thought, and it's regarding just the various biases that we all have. I think like when I think more about it, I think it's kind of primal to that we walk around and carry these various biases that control us, and we're not aware of how they control us. So it's really super important that we learn to have this metacognition, where we walk around and we are aware of our thoughts and why we are feeling the feelings that we're feeling or doing the things that we're doing. But what was new to me was especially this point of negativity bias. I think I've heard it before, but I didn't really understand it. And coincidentally, yesterday, I finished watching the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And throughout the debate, I just couldn't stop being amazed at how on every single, I don't know if you watched it, but on every single question, no matter what it was, Donald Trump was just spewing negativity, always. Oh, I mean, it was to such an extent that I just couldn't believe it, because not a single question was answered, but it was always to go back to the negative things in the way that he wanted to do it. And I thought, why is he doing that? But now I think it makes sense, because it gets stuck in people's minds when they hear it over and over and over and over again. Then it doesn't matter that the other side brings out, well, this has happened, we've done this, we've achieved this and this and this, because the other side just keeps bombarding the debate with negativity. And I think that's partly, correct me if you have other, or please chime in, other opinions, but I think that's why perhaps he's going to be so effective, because it gets stuck. He exploits this negativity bias in the entire population. And, as we are learning, we are not aware of our biases, and we are probably more educated in this sphere than the majority of people, I would assume, because this is not something you learn if you don't actively engage in it. And I just thought that's really scary, actually, because it's like a defect in well, it's not a defect maybe in our humanity, because it serves a purpose to have these biases, but it's so easy to exploit them in this way.
Into what it's in our interest, right? So we might think he's crazy and he doesn't know what he's doing, but he has an agenda. And I think you're very right. He has points that he says over and over and over, and he states them, and he just wants to affirm those points with people that have unhappiness on certain areas of their life, right? So if he plans, like, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets, it's been a fun week here with all the memes about that. But if you think about it, it's so sick that they ask him a question about A, and he answers, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Like, where does that come from? But there's a group of people that have planted this idea, and not only is anybody eating the dogs, is Haitian immigrants eating the dogs. So what's going to be implanted in people that are already unhappy about immigrants, and next time they see somebody that is Black with an accent that is not English accent, they're going to say, that's an Asian and they are eating my dogs. And it's like, and there's no enough soap to wash off that lie that's implanted in there, because we already have, we connect those traps. They're trapped in there. And unless a person comes and consciously clean that up in their brain, they're going to accept that lie. And the next time the next person affirms that, it's going to be more and stronger and stronger. It's going to have roots. It's going to take over. So good point.
I also thought the other side, let's say the democratic side, they really try to be the adult in the, you know, not go to those tactics. They're trying to unite the American people and so on. But I just thought it doesn't work, because the other side is hammering like on people's negativity biases, and it gets stuck. Whereas the other side tries to do the right thing, but I think it's not as effective as the other thing, even though that's the right thing to do, but it's not going to work as well. So it's like, it seems, I had this thought in my head yesterday that to have a fair competition, the Democratic side would have to do the same towards Trump, and they are a little bit trying to like say you're a felon and this and that, but they're like doing 10% and he's doing 150% of the thing. So it's like an unfair competition, but what can you do? Like, one side has to show dignity, but it's like, I'm afraid it will not work.
And the more I get like bias about it, like, oh yeah, well, they're walking in equality and they're smiling, they're being kind, they're being conscious about it. But if you really think about it, it's so divided. And the people that are already implanted with the negative ideas, it's so rooted that for all the good that it might be sounding on the other side, it's not penetrating. That the factor of penetration, like effectivity, is not the same as the bad stuff.
And that's why it's really important that we become aware of these things, because then it cannot be used against us, because we're just as moldable in terms of our biases if we're not aware of them, I think. Let's say negativity bias, it's probably something that we're all prone to, and we have to actively combat it, because the fast brain defaults to these biases, to help us in this information overload, 11 million bits of information every second. Even more so, I assume, when we're on our phones or we're reading the news, so it's a really important topic.
Yeah, if you really think about this, until we don't find our own strategy on how to determine biases in our lives personally, we cannot even go to our groups in the movement and help each other, because if we're still stuck with our own set of biases, it's going to be like you were saying, like the negative stuff is going to take over the positive. And it's very, like, we need to be very accountable for ourselves in this area, I believe.
I agree.
Yeah, I also like the quote that your validated thoughts about, I don't know how it was written, but you have certain values and your unconscious bias go against it. That's really true. You really see that in yourself when you look for those things that you think, I don't want to be a racist, I want to be sexist, I don't but then time and time again those biases come in, and you're like, no, but that's my value, I don't want to.
Like, I hate that. I hate that behavior, but that's my go-to behavior, right? It's like, that's where I go every time. But I hate that, but boom, it goes.
Yeah. There's really a conflict in you.
Yes. And that's why is this so complex?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we have a lot of homework to do still. But that good thing, I mean, that encouraging thing is that God has given us a plan for this. And in the mercy of the plan of salvation, you know, and there's the steps to implement things, to eradicate these biases from us. And it's the only way we're going to do it. And if that step to Christ's quote is very important, is there's nothing good in us. Like we cannot bring anything to the table other than giving God our will. And that's when the Holy Spirit can work with us in making these changes. The only thing we can say, okay, I want to change. And that's the amazing thing about our brain, is that there's elasticity in our pathways that we can create new pathways. So they're not going to be erased, the old pathways, but we can create new pathways. That's very encouraging.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was really
You're welcome. Thank you for entertaining me in my bias quest.